Normally on Tuesdays when I say that, I'm sitting in a different room and about to hold a meeting. This is I shouldn't say a lot more enjoyable, but it is more enjoyable than a council meeting. But it's certainly more exciting in some ways. So I want to welcome everyone to the Typewriter Trail kickoff. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Turner. I'm the mayor of the city of Woodstock, and we could not be more thrilled with what we're kicking off tonight because it is such a unique thing tied to the history of our city. And we are thrilled to be joined by Jett Morton here, who is an expert, a worldwide expert on the Oliver Typewriter and typewriters overall. And we're going to do some Q&A with him, and we're also going to get a presentation from him in just a moment. So before we get started, I should also note that today is National Typewriter Day. So somebody came up with a great idea to do it on this, and coincidentally it worked out very well. So I mentioned Jett, and we certainly appreciate him joining us all the way from West Virginia. And he brought his wife Lauren and his mom Susan joined us as well. From she's from West Virginia as well, and his mom Susan, you're from Connecticut. So thank you very much for making the trip. A few other thank yous before we get started. The entire donation that was made to the city of Woodstock came from a gentleman named Arthur Cobb, and he's up in Minnesota, and he donated his entire collection of approximately 25 to 30 different Oliver typewriters to the city of Woodstock, along with old manuals, along with parts, along with all of this huge collection. This happened about a year ago. I got a phone call, came into City Hall. It was Arthur Cobb. He talked to Jane Howie, my assistant, and left a message with her saying that he wanted to talk to me about Oliver Typewriters and that he had some typewriters to donate. So I get a lot of phone calls, and so I took it, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Haven't got one like this, and so I called him back, and he was an incredibly pleasant gentleman, and he said, I've got this typewriter collection. I want to donate it to the city of Woodstock. And I'm like, okay, well that's very nice. And I'm thinking, okay, well he's got 4 or 5 or 6, and how many do you have? Well, I got 27 or whatever the exact number is. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I said, okay. Now I'm thinking, well, they're in a barn somewhere. What do they look like? No, Arthur took meticulous care of his machines. He repaired them. He restored them. And he sent me pictures, and I was, of them in his office. He's an accountant, a forensic accountant, successful one, up in Edina, Minnesota. And he had an office full of, he had about 5 or 6 people that worked for him. Really nice, simple office, and he had typewriters everywhere. So I asked him, I go, what do you want to do? And he goes, well, I want you to have them. And I said, well, he goes, because they're from Woodstock, and I want to return them to Woodstock. And I said, well, that's very magnanimous of you, Mr. Cobb. And I said, okay. I said, I got to think about the logistics of this. I have no idea how we're going to get 25 to 30, very heavy machines, and they're not as delicate. You actually can. He sat there. Look, count on them, hit them. He goes, they're actually not that delicate, but they're intricate. So you got to take care of them. And all right, so long story, I contacted and talked to Roscoe Stelfer, the city manager, who happens to be sitting back there, and I go, Roscoe, how are we going to get these things down here? Are we going to ship them? He's like, no, it's going to be like 10 grand. We're not going to do that. And that was the right answer. So we noodled it over, and at Roscoe's suggestion, actually, he said, why don't you just take the city van up and pick them up? Because I volunteered. I said, look, I'd be willing to go get them. And I actually have family in Minnesota, so I'm like, okay, I kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, and make a trip up there. So on a Friday, I took a day off work, and on a given Friday last, I guess, fall or late summer, I drove to Edina, Minnesota in the city van that had been stripped of all seats, our utility van, all the seats, everything out of it, and it's just big and flat. So I don't know what to expect when I'm going up there. I pull up into downtown Edina, find a place to park, go up the 3rd floor of his office building, and he excitedly greets me and leads me in, and sure enough, there are typewriters everywhere, and all in beautiful shape. And so he begins to step through what they are, and I get a good history lesson, but I'm also, my mind is going, okay, how are we getting these heavy, very heavy machines into this van, and how are we going to store them, or how are we going to get them organized? So he and I and an office helper from him, we carted all of them down, and then I built the puzzle in the van, and we miraculously fit all of them. It was very tight. We couldn't stack them, and they were all in there. So that finished about 7 or 8 o'clock that night. I made a visit to my mother and stayed overnight, and then headed back. I will say that while the van was parked at the Hampton Inn in Lakeville, Minnesota, I was just waiting for somebody to take a picture of the van with the City of Woodstock logo and put it on What's Happening in Woodstock. I'm kind of happy that didn't happen, although it would have been humorous if it had. So I drove them back, and our great team at the city, mostly the public works team, I think, Roscoe, unloaded them all. We put them down into the conference room in the basement of City Hall. And we contemplated what should we do, and the idea of the Typewriter Trail was born by Michelle Themius. Okay, stand up, Michelle. Michelle is an executive assistant at City Hall. She works very hard with my other team up there that help with all the managers primarily at the city, and she does a phenomenal job. And she, in partnership with Heather Arnold, who runs our Real Woodstock Marketing campaign, came up with the Typewriter Trail. And we created this way to experience Woodstock's history, to drive traffic to the folks that are hosting them, and that's a good thing, right? Arlene Lines, okay, and other places. So the idea was phenomenal, and it's such an important part of Woodstock's history, and they're so unique. Their machines are so unique, and so I think that it's a wonderful combination of a very generous person. And Arthur Cobb could not be here tonight. We did invite him, but he unfortunately couldn't make it. So we were just pleased to have this opportunity. We think we've put together something very unique for the city, and we're going to run it for 6 months through the end of November, and then we'll decide what to do with it after that. But they will stay as part of the city of Woodstock, and I think it's good for those of us that are old enough to remember learning typing. Did everybody learn typing on a real typewriter? IBM Selectric, among others. Okay. Yep. And then it's great to see some kids here, and that darling little girl right there was looking at this machine, and she goes, "Did they have email when these were made?" And I said, no. No, they didn't have it back then. And she goes, "Then why is there an @ sign?" Right? And I simply said, because that was a punctuation sign or a sign used, and then the email came later with the @ sign. But that was a great question and very insightful. So I also want to thank the Woodstock Public Library, especially Martha Hanson, Kirk Doughty, and Keely Flanagan for their work here. So thank you very much, and they're hosting it as well, and the McHenry County Historical Society for the photos and their support of this as well. So let's move into the discussion with Jeff. So Jett Morton joins us. Jett Morton joins us from Morgantown, West Virginia, and he has a passion for typewriters that began when he was a little kid at 7 years old, and discovered his first machine at a yard sale. That curiosity grew into a lifetime pursuit of collecting, researching, and preserving typewriter history. After building a collection of hundreds of typewriters from dozens of manufacturers, Jett focuses efforts on documenting and collecting every model and variation produced or licensed by the Oliver Typewriter Company. This all culminated in him writing a book called the Oliver Typewriter, the Standard Visible Writer, which talks about the history of the typewriter, and those books are on order to be delivered to Arlene Lines. There's a few tonight, but they're on order to begin being sold at Arlene's fine store. Woodstock, for a period, was known as Typewriter City. This was, what percentage was Woodstock? Roughly 50%?
About, yes.
50% of the world's manufacturing of typewriters between 1896 and about 1927 was in Woodstock, Illinois. You got to think in terms of today, okay? You know, the center of the universe, right, for communication devices, right, is, you know, Palo Alto or in Silicon Valley, and Woodstock had that role for a very unique period of time. So, without further ado, let me introduce Jett. Jett's got a presentation to walk through.
Yes.
Welcome, Jett Morton.
Thank you, Mike. Wow, it is really an honor to be here. And when I first heard about this donation that was made by my collector friend Arthur Cobb, I couldn't be more delighted that his machines found a permanent home here, where they were all manufactured. And when Michelle reached out to me about this, I was, you know, ecstatic that these machines are getting a new light once again and getting to be shared with everybody and the younger generation in the community. And I've been you know, very honored to help out and provide information. And I have here a little background about the Oliver Typewriter Company that I've been researching for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. My collection now is just about every model of 70-some Olivers that were from here and exported to all over the world. And I am just, you know, it's very full circle to me to come here to Woodstock tonight and be a part of this. So again, I'm very appreciative I'm here. So let's get started with Thomas Oliver, the inventor of the typewriter. He was a Canadian citizen, grew up on his father's farm, and he had a very mechanical mindset. He was mechanically inclined. He liked to tinker. There's a story that he one day took his mother's teapot and made it into a steam boiler. He loved to tinker and convert all these things, and this is all simple farm tools, just a farm boy on a rural farm in Canada. Built windmills, threshing machines, all kinds of little gadgets, that's what he was into. He got married in 1874. He had a couple kids, and after the passing of his mother, the Oliver family relocated to Iowa in 1879, and Oliver became a reverend, and he began preaching on a Methodist circuit in Iowa in different towns. So he would go traveling from town to town, from Monticello to Dubuque to Epworth, all these, you know, very, very small towns, preaching his sermons. And on his travels, he was, it said that he was at a bank in DeWitt, Iowa, and he saw a stenographer, or somebody using a typewriter at the time. This is, you know, 1880s, and at the time, typewriters were blind writers. And this means that when you are typing, you cannot see the text as it is being printed on the page. So you would have to type your sentence, lift up, and look at the text that strikes the underside of the platen where the paper is. So you type, you lift it up, and you look at it, and then you put it back down to keep typing. Very, very backwards concept from modern day thinking. And he took one look at this from afar, you know, never really examining it. He just said, well, that's very inefficient. I can make something better than that. So that's what he did. He set out and he created a couple prototypes. He had this pivoting arc design for his first patent. It didn't work well. I don't know if there's any examples about it, but it didn't work well. And so he came up after thinking for however long in his study, and he said in a newspaper article years ago, he fell asleep and he had this eureka moment. He woke up and he thought of this mechanism that would solve this problem, to have a visible typewriter that he was trying to create, and it's the U-shaped type bar that you see on the Oliver. So it's literally a U, like so, that strikes down from both sides of the platen on top, where you can see what you're typing as you type. And at the time, this was never sold commercially on any machine. All brands were blind writers, all popular brands. And so here you can see his first downstrike type bar design, which is essentially the same mechanism that you see on all of these Olivers here, where they have two towers and they strike down to the platen. Here's the Oliver 1, the first model. He actually made it in Iowa. This is before coming to Woodstock, in a little town, Epworth, Iowa. He started building them in the upstairs of his residence that was on Main Street. A couple local mechanics helped him out. He had the bases cast by a local foundry, and this man, without any knowledge, any experience with typewriters, with the help of a couple friends, started manufacturing these machines in the little upstairs of his building, which is impressive to say the least. It originally sold for $75, or almost $2,800 a day. So it was a pretty hefty penny for the time, comparing to something like a computer or a laptop today. But the Oliver 1 is very unique and hard to find today, but it's identifiable by the flat side handles. Only the one has side handles that sit flush on the table, just if you ever see one. After he left his house, he said, well, I need a factory. So a couple local guys built a building, a little 2-story factory in Epworth, and this is the first official home of the Oliver Typewriter. And this was only in use for about 2 years or so in this factory. And so Thomas Oliver started selling a couple hundred machines, and he said, well, we're going to have to expand. So what did he do? He went with a couple of his workers and, looking into getting some investments. He went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, who had a pretty big workforce over there, and he discussed relocating to a factory to manufacture his machines, to relocate everything and start up a whole new factory. And plans were pretty close to do that. They published in the newspapers, hey, we're Oliver's relocating to Wisconsin. And it was almost done until he went to Woodstock, and the city of Woodstock had a factory that was by the Wheeler and Tappan Pump Company, who left after only 2 years, and they had this abandoned factory. And so the city of Woodstock told Thomas Oliver, if you relocate here and produce your machines here, and you do this for 5 years and employ so many employees, we will give you the factory. And that is what happened. So at the very last minute, plans were changed, and January 1896, they shipped all of the factory supplies and machinery from Epworth on the train. They brought it over on the railroad to the Woodstock location, and they started prepping it. It took a couple months. By the summer of 1896, they started producing the new model of Oliver, the Oliver No. 2. And from then on, everything grew and grew. They had 80 employees, 15 that came from the Epworth factory, and within that same year, 150 employees, 175 the next year, By 1900, they had 300 employees, and this factory it was the largest plant in Woodstock, and it was one of the largest factories in the world at the time. Now, of course, they were still getting used to things in the new factory, fine-tuning the typewriter. So the first 8 months, it took them about, it took 8 months to produce 100 typewriters, which is not very many. But they were employing and driving a workforce here in the city of Woodstock, and after that, it skyrocketed. Here's a map. I'm sure most of you may be familiar with where the factory was. Right there along First Street and the railroad. There's the apartment buildings are partially there, but most of it is currently just an empty field. And this right here is one of the land areas that show kind of where the additions were going to be. This was about 1902, this map that was published in their company magazine. I always thought it was really neat just to see kind of a overall layout, and it's big. It was a massive, just even my wife, Mom, and I walked the field yesterday just to see how big it was. And when you're there in person, it's like, wow, this was a big operation. Just getting to see in person the whole empty field and how long it stretches, it was impressive, to say the least. And here I just got a few pictures of some of the, they had Oliver flowers here. Their company office was in front, and their main factory building behind it. Here you can still see the train tracks and a larger view of the factory behind the office. And yeah, just really neat to see, all of these employees. That it was 1,400 employees at their peak production in the 1910s and into the 1920s. And here, this is around noontime. They are taking their lunch. This is a photo from winter of 1908 that was shown to me by a descendant of one of the workers, which is really neat. I've never seen this photo published anywhere else until I got it, because it was just in her personal collection. And here's a close-up of the sign that shows the office. This is the main entrance when you walk into the factory. You would see the factory office before getting to the main building. And these are pretty small photos, pretty grainy, but just to show you the idea of what kind of operations they had going on. They had rooms for everything. They had press machines, they had nickel plating, they had enameling departments, they had screw machines, drill presses. It was a giant machine shop. And just seeing all these photos, you can only imagine the noise that went on in this factory. And this is one of my favorite photos that shows the assembly department, just because it was so crisp and clear, and you can see everybody at their different stages of assembling these partially assembled machines. And then you look in the background, you see the finished machines sitting on the shelves back here, or just some of the frames before they put on all of the keys or all of the type bars and everything. I always found this one pretty neat. And over 31 years here in Woodstock, they made 15 different models or so. The highest model is the Oliver 11, but there are some other different options that they had in there. They sent some overseas, some to Latin America. They licensed production in different countries. They went international with production. Over 1 million machines were made right here in Woodstock, which is pretty impressive. It was about 375 machines during the late 1910s that they peaked production. So going from 100 machines in 8 months when they started to 375 in one day is a pretty good improvement, I would say. And this is one of my favorite photos of the outside that I believe there's a couple examples of this upstairs on display too, that shows just how many people they were employing. I think this was in the 1910s, so I don't know how many are here, but it's a good number. And that's what I have for the presentation, just to catch up to speed how they got here.
Jett, did they, back to the small photos or the slide, but you talked a little bit about, how they made them. Were all machine parts made on site?
Yes, everything, screws, every little screw on the machine, the bases, every single part was manufactured from scratch at the Woodstock plant.
Very interesting.
Yes, it
That
was
really is
all
counter to how things are made today, right? Parts are made somewhere else, they're shipped word somewhere else, and then they're assembled. So quite amazing that they made it all on
Yes,
site.
it was an impressive operation that every single part was made and finished and assembled and shipped in one building.
So talk about also the overseas versions, because I remember hearing discussion, because some of the finishes, right?
Yes.
Were different. Talk about those variations and
Yes.
what was unique about the ones that went overseas.
So the ones that went to Latin America, they were often entirely nickel plated. The idea is to withstand the humidity that was down towards the equator and even more south. Whether it really did or not, there you see some that are kind of rusted out, and it was just their attempt because the enamel or the lacquer that most machines were painted they thought would wear away much faster. So you'll see variations they're harder to find in the United States. There are some that are still down there floating around, but they're all nickel plated. And then they sent machines over to Europe. The even numbered models were derivative versions of the odd numbers. So in the US they sold the number 3, but in Europe they sold the number 4, which has 4 additional keys to accommodate for foreign languages. So foreign languages have extra characters, accents, different keyboard layouts. So they would do this for each model. You have the 3 and the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, the 8, and so on. And that's how they were able to really get into different markets worldwide by offering a machine with extra characters that fit the language of the region.
Do you have any idea approximately how many were domestic U.S. sales and how many overseas? What rough percentage?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The overseas ones weren't documented very well, but I've kind of reverse engineered the quantities, and there were 30 or 40,000 of the foreign ones versus 1 million of the domestic ones. So it's a very, very small percentage compared to the standard models. Now, they also had the standard models sold worldwide, but the ones with the wider bases for additional keys, they're much fewer quantity. They didn't need as many. It was more of a kind of a specialized thing.
Okay. And so, what do you think contributed to the success and growth, to the maximum level that they were producing in that? How did the Oliver typewriter compete against or compare to others in the market at that time?
Well, when it was first introduced, the 3 key points that Thomas Oliver wanted to emphasize were the visible writing. With the type bars on the sides, they struck and you could see as you type. The other advantage that he often talked about in his early advertisements, the permanent alignment. So other machines at the time, they only had one pivot point, and they did not stay in alignment. You would type for a while, and some of the characters would drift, and you'd have to realign them and get them serviced. Oliver's machine has 2 points of contact on each type bar, on this U type bar, and so that helps keep them in alignment. You can type for much longer without having to service your machine. And the final point that Oliver really wanted to hone in on was the simplicity of it. Most machines at the time had about 2,000 parts on the machines on the market. Every machine, 2,000 parts. The Oliver, 400 to 600 parts, depending on the model. And that in itself is a game changer for manufacturing, because you could make machines that are reliable. You can get them out and built faster, and get them out to the customers faster.
And I saw some versions that had the wide you know, the carriages that piece is, the wide ones, like
Yes.
for accounting,
Yes.
accounting tables, talk about those.
Yes.
I found them fascinating,
So the
talk about them.
yes, the Oliver Company, as well as other companies, but they offered different widths of carriages to accommodate wider papers, ledgers, accounting tables, and you could get carriages. A standard length was about 9 inches. You could get a 12-inch, 15, 18. They made 30-inch carriages on some of these Olivers. There are a couple that have wooden bases, like this base up here, but it's about this big, and they have support brackets and a whole frame just to hold the carriage on, so it doesn't, you know, teeter over. And it's pretty neat. They accommodated their machines to their customers, really.
So, and in your book, you know, there's, you know, from what has been described to me, you talk about some of the workers and the stories behind that, and the families and all that. You know, what are some of the more, without giving away the entire book, because we don't
sure.
want to do that, but talk a little bit about, you know, about some of the things that you have learned in your research about the people that work there.
Yeah, you know, the best part, the most enjoyable part I had about researching and writing this book on these machines and this company was actually getting to track down some descendants and interview some descendants. One I can think of off the top of my head, Mildred Llewellyn. She is the granddaughter of a Gus Person, who was a Swedish immigrant, and he worked in the factory. He worked in several different roles, and one of the things that he did, he designed and patented the disappearing indicator. So there's a little, it's the equivalent of a cursor, so to speak, where it shows you where your character is going to type, and when you strike the key, it moves out of the way, and so it strikes, and then it goes back, so you can see what part of the line you're on. And it was great because Mildred did not know that he got credit for this design that he came up with, and I said, no, I found the patent. They patented this through the Oliver Company, but he is the inventor on this patent. And she was so thrilled to hear that he actually got credit for this design that was on pretty much every Oliver model from there on out. So that was one of my favorite stories.
So it ran until manufacturing here until around 1926, 27.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So what was the change? What happened?
So, you know, after World War I, there were a few things that kind of led to the decline of the company. One was the typewriter market was changing. You had front strike machines, the standard, you know, Underwood, Remington Royal, the type basket in the front, machines that are conventional typewriters by today's standards. Those were taking over the market. They had 4 rows of keys instead of 3. They had a full numbers row. You didn't have to shift the type of number. And the design of the Oliver was starting to get outdated. Another factor was there was a minor recession in 1921 and 1922. And so they, before this, the Oliver Company, they had the machine at $99. And then they went to a mail order sales strategy. They closed their branch offices. They did mail order only. They cut the price to $49. Now, this worked. They sold lots and lots of Olivers. But then this recession hit, and a lot of people defaulted on their payments. So they ended up repoing, I don't know, hundreds and thousands.
They had payment plans, right?
Oh, they were on payment plans. It was $3 or $5 a month at the time, and yeah, they had a lot of machines that were repossessed, and they ended up having to sell a lot in bulk at a loss to different stores, and that really that kind of pretty much put them out of business by the end of the 1920s, and they ended up having to liquidate. Yeah, it was kind of you know, it was just a combination of several factors that ended up causing them to close their doors, and actually one of the director who managed their offices overseas ended up buying the equipment and relocating the company to the United Kingdom, to England, and they actually opened up the British Oliver, and they kept producing and branding typewriters for 20 more years or so at least.
Okay,
Which is
really,
kinda
until
neat.
when? So into the 1940s?
1950s.
Okay,
Yeah.
1950s.
Yeah, so the legacy did live on after Woodstock in England. They sold a couple of the downstrike machines. There was an order from the British government for about 20,000 machines. And then alongside this, they started rebranding European portables by other companies. They slapped the Oliver logo on it and sold it as Oliver through licensing deals. And so that's when you see these small little Oliver portables, that's what you're seeing, or you're seeing these British rebranded machines. And they did that until, I believe, 1959, they officially closed their doors for good.
Interesting. That's quite a transformation, or start to finish. It's an interesting
It
story.
is. It was a long journey.
Yeah.
It really was.
Certainly. So definitely want to open it up to audience members. So yes, you first, and then I'll.
Yes, you spoke briefly about the difference in the technology between Oliver and the other companies. Could you talk also about some of the other companies that were based here in Woodstock? I personally own a Woodstock typewriter, and they have a
Yes.
speakeasy that's called the Emerson and Oliver, so I'm assuming Emerson was another company here. How they were related to each other, what portion of the market each one had, and whether they overlapped at the same time, or one was earlier, one was later, and so forth.
Yes, that is a very good question, because Woodstock is home to, the history of Woodstock is home to a couple other brands. The Emerson Typewriter Company was in Woodstock, off the top of my head, I can't give you an exact year, but it was a smaller company. They're harder to find. They're these little three rows of keys, a 3-bank, kind of a mid-sized machine, not a portable, not a standard. They were called Emerson, and they manufactured in the thousands of these, and I believe the company was acquired by Woodstock in 1907 is when Woodstock opened, and they also produced hundreds of thousands of typewriters over the years. You'll see models 5 and 4. They went 1940s. I don't know off the top of my head, but it was another very successful brand that was both Emerson and Woodstock, kind of alongside Oliver.
Were they owned by like Sears or something? I think I read that.
He backed them.
Okay.
He gave them money.
Okay.
And that they were gonna go out of business, they didn't do well, and the #1 Sears and Roebuck that started it, he gave them money. He lived here in Woodstock.
Yeah.
Also, Roebuck was an engineer, and he designed the typewriter.
Okay, yeah, that's what I have.
So you had a question.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you know how many patents the Oliver Typewriter Company ended up owning?
Dozens and dozens and dozens. There is a list in my book. I have a full table of every patent that I could find. It's probably missing some. They have, I don't know, at least probably 100 in the US. They had Great Britain patents, they had Canadian patents, they had patents all over the world. Every new mechanism or feature, some implemented, some not, they had patented just for legal reasons, just to keep their intellectual property there.
And then, yes, you.
I'm just wondering, when the typewriters started to become popular, was it mainly businesses that were buying them, or were personal
So that's
typewriters too?
That's a really good question. When Thomas Oliver first started selling his machines when he was in Iowa, he was a minister, and his first customers were actually other ministers to type sermons, to make his sermons more visible. So he went to other ministers. Some schools, there was business school owners, and they did some marketing to colleges, and even around this time they had salesmen in branch offices, and by then, by the Woodstock days, they were selling to both individuals, they were selling to schools, departments, and they really did both markets by the time they were at Woodstock.
Yes.
I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
My question is, did Oliver did he design the QWER pattern for the letters on the, he did?
He did not.
He did not.
The QWERTY keyboard was a design by Christopher Latham Scholes and Carlos Glidden, who created the first manufactured commercial typewriter, the Scholes and Glidden, otherwise known as the Remington No. 1, in 1874. And this machine had the QWERTY keyboard that we all know today on our computers and phones. And he did this by rearranging the letters from alphabetical order to slow the typist down because the keys got jammed. They would type too fast and two type bars struck at the same time, and you'd have to get in there and unjam it. So he intentionally slowed the typist down by confusing you with the keyboard. And for whatever reason, and there are all kinds of other experimental keyboards, but that became commonplace by the 1880s, and it stuck. And that's why every other typewriter company, by the 1900s, that was their.
So the QWERTY is not designed for efficiency of which ones you use the most?
No,
It was based
no.
on that? And was that
I'm pretty
random?
sure that's what my typing teacher told me.
That's what my typing teacher told me that. Although the A,
Typing
look,
teacher
the A
lied.
is out of my pinky, so that doesn't necessarily make sense either. So was this a random design?
It was a little, it was somewhat random, yeah. I mean, I don't know the exact, okay, put this one here, I don't know that. But I think they started with alphabetical order and started to just kind of rearrange and trial and error. That's my best guess.
And what year again was that?
1874 was when the Scholes and Glidden was on the market.
And when did QWERTY was the standard? Was it right away, or did it take a decade, or?
I would say 1880s, 1890s. By the 1900s, for sure, it was standard. There were, Hammond was a popular company in the 1880s. They had a 2-row curved keyboard to start. Blickensderfer was in the 1890s. They had a 3-row keyboard called Diatensor, where they put the most commonly used keys on the bottom row. It's spelled DHIATENSOR. And then the second most common, the middle row, and the least used, like ZX, K, G, B, V, Q, J, those are the top row. And just another way to do it.
Yes.
Then I had a comment. Actually, my great aunt, Ellie Viola, worked at the Woodstock Typewriter Company.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
Such a
awesome.
Wonder Lake.
That's
And here's
terrific.
another little story. My mother and her cousin, who lived in Chicago, would visit Tante Ellie. She was from Germany. And they met 2 brothers who lived in Wonder Lake, and they ended up getting married.
Oh, wow.
And that's, so Typewriter Company could be why I am there.
Yes, ma'am.
Will computers based off of typewriters?
The keyboard, for sure. Yeah, the typewriter is the precursor to the computer. They basically, you had the manual typewriter, they made it electric, and then it transformed to a word processor, which in turn became a computer. So yes, it is a real direct evolution into a computer.
Yeah.
Very good question.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
I guess I'm just curious, the packaging for shipping, how did, you know anything about that? I'm thinking these are pretty, they get banged around in a wagon or something.
Yes, good question. All of the Olivers were shipped in big wooden crates. They pretty much sat in there kind of snug, and the carriage was taken off of the machine and it was placed into a separate compartment into the crate, and they were crated up into a big rectangular crate. And there's actually a crate on display upstairs, and you can see how big, and they have branding on the side, the Oliver Typewriter. It would come with a label on the side with the serial number, and that actually leads me into another important feature of the Oliver. The carriage is removable without any tools. You can take the carriage off of the machine and put it back on easily for cleaning and maintenance. And so that's how they could just take the carriage off, put it in its little tray in the crate, and they packed it up and stacked all the crates. It was a lot of wood, but that's really the only way you could do it safely, especially by rail car back then.
Yes.
Was Has the Oliver symbol printed on those crates?
Yes, they had the famous Oliver typewriter in the big red circle on the side of the crates, and that symbol is on almost all of the paper tables. It was on their letterheads. That was their main icon, so to speak. It was the newest model at the time would go in the red circle, and that's how you knew it was an Oliver.
And how many years would you estimate, like how many years was the Oliver Typewriter Company selling typewriters in Woodstock?
In Woodstock, they were here from 1896 to 1927 or so. So about 31 years.
Yes.
So, do you know anything about restoring the Oliver typewriters?
Yes, I do. What I do for my machines, and you know, I buy, sell, trade. I sell parts online. I get emails all the time. People say, "Hey, I found my grandmother's Oliver, whatever, in the attic. It's missing this. Do you have this part?" And I say, "Most likely." I sell them the part from machines that weren't worth fixing up or restoring.
Right.
Machines that are worth fixing up, I take a conservative approach. I don't like to repaint them.
Right.
I'm more of a subtractive restoration. I will clean them, keep everything original as best I can. I'll put a new draw cord to connect the carriage if the carriage doesn't move or advance when you type. And yeah, I try to clean them up as best I can and salvage as they are, because that was the paint Woodstock they put on, you know, the Oliver Company put on. That was the nickel plating. That's what I try to do. Now some people will they'll repaint. You can't match the original finish. You can't do it. It was a nitrocellulose lacquer, very dangerous chemical that you don't want to mess with. Very niche people that even do that these days.
Right, well, this kid might have some questions for you after.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you probably have had this question before, but once he became this huge, you know, typewriter personnel, you know, did he find himself in pulpits on occasion?
He was Thomas Oliver.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was involved in the company. He was from what I understand, he was a well-liked person with people at the factory. He did pass away in 1909, so he only saw the Oliver 5. The most successful model was the 9, so he never even got to see that. But he did remarry, which at the time was somewhat taboo. And he remarried a young Danish immigrant, and I actually spoke to his great-grandson, Lester Oliver, and he told me some of basically his family kind of outcasts, ostracized him, and the family didn't really get any inheritance, I think because of the remarry. It was a little scandalous, and there's no documentation on it much aside from the fact that he did remarry, and that's about all we know as concerned with that. But it is interesting to think about.
Yes.
So he took over the company after he died then?
So the company was still in operation. He wasn't a CEO or anything. They had a board. It was incorporated, and they had board members, and I think he really just got royalties from the company. So the company was just self-sufficient in operating, and they continued operations as they were.
Was it ever a public company, or was it always private? Do you know?
No, I believe it was private not maybe early on, but.
Okay. You had a question?
I was just wondering, I know nowadays advertising, if there's a celebrity or a writer or something that uses the product, was there anybody, famous writer or somebody that says, "Oh, I use an Oliver typewriter"?
I think there may be. I can't think of anything, like Ernest Hemingway or Stephen King. I can't think of anybody that specifically does. One thing that I look into, that I have a little page on my website about, I look at Olivers in film and movies. and it's really neat to see who has used them in film and movies. There's a movie with Christopher Plummer using an Oliver 3. There are Olivers in more movies than you think until you go back and be like, wait a minute. And you can always spot it because you can see these big type towers on the side. And I think they use them in movies a lot because they're so unique, they're eye-catching.
Yes, sir.
Did you say that Oliver was born in Woodstock, Ontario, Canada?
Yes.
So was he destined to end up in Woodstock? Was he fond of the name Woodstock?
That's a good eye there, yes. It is very coincidental and ironic. He was born in Woodstock, Ontario, Canada. He got married in Paris, Ontario, Canada, and then he moved to Iowa and then went to Woodstock, Illinois. So I don't know if it was fate or what have you, but yeah, that is interesting. He was born in a Woodstock and ended up in Woodstock.
Yes.
Yeah, how did you get into typewriters? Why typewriters?
Good questions. So my parents and I, we would, when I was 7 years old, really young, we go to yard sales and flea markets on the weekends, and I saw a typewriter, and I played some computer games, played video games, computer games. I knew the computer keyboard, and I saw a typewriter, and I asked my dad, I was like, where's the monitor? Where's the monitor? And he showed me, like, no, this is a typewriter. And it was, I don't know the model, it was probably a 1980s Smith Corona electric, a word processor. I thought it was neat, so we got it, $5 or something, $10. And we would go to yard sales, I'd get a couple more. And then after so long, there was my dad's former accountant, when he had a business, he was having a sale one day in his office. And this accountant, his name is Herman Price of the Chestnut Ridge Typewriter Museum. He had about 200 machines in his office. And I mean antique typewriters, machines that I'd never heard of or seen of. And my dad and I were fascinated. We were in awe. And Herman gave me the first machine that he got when he started collecting, a little folding Corona 3. And it's a very neat, highly successful typewriter in the late 1910s, early 1920s. And from then on, I started going to typewriter meetings that Herman would host. I started getting into the typewriter magazine that there is, and I started really getting into the more antique typewriters, and the collection grew from there.
Yes.
A point of information regarding the question about celebrity use of typewriters. Tom Hanks has a huge collection of typewriters, and if I remember correctly, he used one of those typewriters to write the play that premiered off-Broadway last year. I don't know which type of typewriter, but I'm pretty sure he did initially write it on a typewriter.
Yes.
Was there one in the back? Yes.
Can you share what's the special about the two typewriters up front?
Yes, absolutely. So I brought with me two pretty unique machines in my collection. The chief inspector at the Oliver Company, from the day they opened here in Woodstock to pretty close towards the end, his name was Harry Cross. He grew up in England. He was an English immigrant, and he learned the sewing machine manufacturing trade when he was in his teens. He came to Canada, and then went to the United States, working in all of these different sewing machine companies before ending up in Woodstock at the Oliver Company. So he was a master mechanic, and he was in charge of inspecting every Oliver typewriter that left the doors of the factory. And the Oliver Company gave him an Oliver II with a plaque on the front that says, what does it? Harry Cross, with the compliments of the Oliver Typewriter Company. And feel free after to take a look, but there's a little plaque on the front, and I was fortunate enough to acquire this from his family who had it, and they wanted to find a good home, and it found a great home. It was one of the most unique machines I've ever seen, and I think it was a one of one. I don't know why specifically it was given to him. I assume it was a performance reward or thank you. yeah, this was his Oliver too. Now the other one here, this is the Woodstock Oliver. Now to clarify, there's the Woodstock Typewriter Company,
Yes, yeah, I
made
was confused.
hundreds of thousands of machines. This has nothing to do with that. This predates the Woodstock Typewriter Company by about 9 years. The Oliver Company in 1898 made a variant of their current model, the Model 2, for department stores. And this machine, it has on the side, it says Woodstock. It says Woodstock on the paper table, only Woodstock, doesn't say Oliver. They sold it to Montgomery Ward, and they actually only made 19 of them.
Wow.
They didn't sell well. It was in the fall and winter catalog of 1898. Then before this machine turned up years ago, all we knew as collectors was this little advertisement in this catalog, this one little picture with this description, and nobody ever saw it until this one, which is number 9 of 19, showed up, and I was able to add it to my collection. And it was.
What'd you pay for that?
More than I should have.
That's a question that could only come from his mother.
Yes. Exactly. It was one, like I said, the only one of 19, and there was this article there that goes. There's more into it, but the long story short, they basically offered $5,000 to produce 20 machines if anybody had 20 of these, because they were trying to prove only 19 were made. And 5,000 at the time was an astronomical amount. They only made 19. They withdrew it from the market after 10 months, and this is the only one known. And this has probably not been to Woodstock in over 100 years until tonight.
Are they all serial numbered? Do they all for all
This one right here is
Yeah.
1009. So they started at 1001 for these. Now the Olivers, with the Oliver 2, they started at about 5,000, and the U.S. machines went all the way up into the 1 million with the Oliver 11. They just continued on with the serial numbers.
What was different about the Woodstock?
It's pretty much an Oliver 2, but the side panels actually are embossed Woodstock. It's labeled Woodstock, and the side handles are unique. They're very long and short. That's never been seen on any other Oliver. Why they did it, I don't know, but that's just what they did for this machine. The base is like kind of rectangular too. You see the. Hold it up here. See the side panels there have Woodstock on the side.
Yeah, Amber.
We have the Oliver number 8 at our store at Artisans on Main. I was told that there's very few of those in the world.
Yes. Yes. The 8 is one of the odd derivative foreign models. That might be one of the only ones with that wide of a carriage of the 8 also. It's there's, I want to say about 16. Back when I started collecting, there was only 1 or 2 of them.
Yes.
So that typewriter was technically made by the Oliver Typewriter Company?
It was, yes. Yep, right here in Woodstock.
Other questions? Sure. Yes, sir.
You were talking about wooden cases that they were shipped in.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like right out of the railroad yard here?
Yes.
Would they be in these boxes too?
Yeah, so a lot of times these metal crates, they would put them in these. These were sold as an accessory. So if you bought a machine with the case, it would come with this metal crate lid on a wooden base. And I think the whole thing would just be in the crate as well, but if you didn't buy the case, the machine would just be in the crate. You could also, the Oliver could be argued it's a portable typewriter because you could put it in its travel case.
Oh, yeah.
I've
So it has
One
these
up.
little
How do
wooden
you not
clamps
agree that
in
it is
here.
portable?
Now these travel cases are rarer than most Olivers. There's only 2 or 3 of these known. These are so hard to find, probably because nobody wanted to take their Oliver with them, because it's massive. I mean, 30 pounds of machine in this, you gotta really be carrying that around. But it's neat, and it does protect them while they're in travel.
Yeah.
So as a lot of us are Woodstock residents, what do you, since you're coming from far and telling us all about this, what do you want us to know as, you know, as proud citizens? Give us
Yes.
some pep talk.
Yes.
Wow, you live here, you get to know this.
Yes. Well, the history of the Oliver Company and Woodstock should be celebrated. It's unlikely that somebody in here doesn't have members or ancestors that work for the company, as we've already established. Woodstock was the main employer of the town. 1 in 10 people work for the company. I mean, this was what the town was known for decades. And it's just really special to think about how there are Olivers all over the world that came right out of Woodstock. I mean, everywhere from Latin America, Argentina, there's collectors in Australia finding Olivers, South Africa, there are Olivers all over Europe. There are Russian Olivers, Greek Olivers, everywhere.
Yes.
So how did the Woodstock Typewriter business come through? Did that come through Emerson or through Oliver?
The Woodstock Typewriter Company was, I believe, a derivative of the Emerson Typewriter Company. I think there was no relation to Oliver business-wise. They were technically a competitor, but I think that's what Emerson evolved into, if I understand correctly.
That's where my mom worked.
Okay.
During World War II.
Yeah, okay.
We did just look that up, and that is what we found.
Yeah,
online,
yeah.
but-
Yes.
So those like cases were like really rare. Do we
Yeah.
know how many were made?
We don't. There's no counting or anything that we know, but I don't think too many were made. The metal cases are common, but this leather case is the rare one. There's even another kind that was a rounded leather case in this nice brown leather I've seen in the catalogs. I've never seen one. It's probably one out there somewhere, but I've never seen one.
So when you brought these from West Virginia?
Yes.
Did you fly or drive?
I drove.
You drove, okay.
Yeah, no,
Just
no pain
wondering.
Now-
I don't know if I put them under the plane, right? But yes.
I'm just curious, did the Woodstock, did they come and develop their factory and stuff here because they knew they could have skilled workers or something, or
That is-
why would they?
Yes, that is very likely. I would argue so. Without knowing specifically, that's probably the reason. Same reason Thomas Oliver was looking in Kenosha. They had a lot of other manufacturing in the area. Same with Woodstock. There was some manufacturing. There was that pump company that actually shut down though within the first couple of years. They built the factory in 1893 for $15,000, which was about $500,000 today. And then they built it for this company, and they couldn't, for whatever reason, they shut down, and so then they had this brand new empty factory, and Oliver came in. And to your point about bringing these on a plane, a fun story. One of my nickeled Oliver 7s I used to have that was sold in Latin America. I found one in Mexico online. I was going to Cozumel for a wedding, and I had them ship it over there. Because shipping it across the country in Mexico was about $12. And I shipped it there, picked it up, and I flew back with it to the United States. And going through customs, they were swabbing it with all these things. And I have no idea what's on this machine. But they were all pretty good sports about it, looking at it through security and seeing it on the X-rays and all that. That was a fun time.
Yes.
Did the company do any fun things?
Yes, they did. There were lots of extracurricular activities with the company. They had a band, which you will see some of the band photos around circulating. I think there's a couple upstairs. They had a baseball team, and some of the players on the team went pro, which is really neat. So it was a big thing. The baseball team, the band, they had a fire brigade, they had lots of community involvement and community picnics and company picnics. It was a big family. I mean, it was a big group of hard workers.
Yes.
What were the band and like the baseball team and everything? What were they called?
The Olivers was the baseball team, and I think they just went by the Oliver Typewriter Band. And you'll see in the photos on their drum, they have their typewriter in the red circle on the side of their drum, and that's how you knew it was the Oliver Band. That's the first thing you looked at when you see those pictures.
You said one of the guys on their baseball team went pro.
Yes.
Who was it?
George Moriarty. George Moriarty, and I think there was at least a second one, but Moriarty was the most famous.
What year? 1910s, 1900s?
1900s. I think he went pro. They started in 1902 with the baseball team. I think he was pro by 1904 or 5. Only a few years.
Arlene?
Jett, how many are in your personal collection today?
I have about 75 Olivers, give or take. I pretty much hit a point of I have a good example of every model. Occasionally I'll find a different one and I'll sell one or swap one out. But yes, I went from almost 400 typewriters back in the 2019, 2020, and then I finally focused on Oliver, and I ended up with about 75 Olivers today.
How many times have you moved them?
Way Yeah.
I think she knows the answer to that.
I don't have no fingers.
Yeah. It's always fun to move.
Did you give an answer?
I don't know, 6.
All right, 6, okay.
6, maybe 5,
Yes.
7.
It sounds like in the room, several people have family members who were women who worked for the company. Do you have a sense of the ratio of men to women? who work for the
Yes,
company?
that is a great question. In the factory, the actual manufacturing part, I believe, was men, but the women played a pretty important role. One, Hattie Young, she was the assistant superintendent that worked in that office building in front of the factory, and she worked alongside her brother, who was also assistant superintendent. And then the headquarters were in Chicago, and a lot of the offices, filing departments, I mean, it was all women ran. They did all of the numbers and the accounting and the operations, and even at branch offices all over the U.S. and parts of the world, it was clerks that were women that really kept everything on track and up and running.
So peak employment, you said it was 1,500?
Yeah, 14 or 1,500 in the factory.
At the factory.
At the factory,
Okay,
yes.
and then in the distribution network? Idea?
Yeah, I mean, there were at least a dozen different branch offices in the U.S., maybe close to 20, and depending on the branch office and how many employees they had, there were hundreds and hundreds of employees.
Okay. Yes.
Related to that one of the photos we have in our archives is it is a woman in front of the factory and it's labeled the bench girls.
Yes.
So we didn't know what role it was. It doesn't sound like the secretarial or assistant role. The bench
Okay.
girl sounds like something more official, on the floor.
I would think it would be something accounting based, but I'd have to look at the photo. I'm actually not sure offhand. It's a good question. Yeah, I'd be curious.
Can I make a quick plug? The library has an incredible digital archive on their website. It's called and it's how you find it from the main page.
If you go to collections and go to local, one of the collections is local history, and I just realized in the rush to get everything set up, I did not put it directly on the front page. So we go there tomorrow. Go there tomorrow.
And Michelle, do we have that link on the Real Woodstock page for
Yes.
Typewriter Trail as well, to theirs?
Yes,
Okay.
I would double check. I
Okay.
would make sure the
We'll
whole-
double check that. Arlene, since you had the floor a moment ago, how do people buy one of these?
Well, we have 4 copies here tonight.
3. I am paying for it, I will, of course, okay? But I would.
There are an additional 5 coming to read between the lines, but we can order them, and they are print on demand. So that is a little bit of a delay. I will state, because they are an $80 book, Jett, you can talk about it too. When you produce a hardcover book of this specificity, I guess, that's not being mass produced, but printers also with photographs when they're in books that's what makes the cost go up.
Yes,
It's more like, frankly, it's a historical, it's kind of like a coffee table book, to be frank. It's not put on the shelf. From my looking at it, the historical nature of this and the pictures and all that. It's very insightful.
It basically, it's got over 600 photos. It takes you through the whole history of Thomas Oliver up into the end of the company, and there is a history of every single model that the company here in Woodstock and in the UK produced, the differences, photos, more info than you'll ever need.
Is the library getting a copy?
Yeah, we have a reference copy, and when Arlene's books come in, we'll have a circulating copy also.
Awesome.
So right now, as part of the display upstairs, we
And
have.
do you have ordering information on your website, Arlene, or Facebook?
They would just need to put in the search bar Oliver Typewriter book,
Okay.
and it would pop up.
Pop up, okay, very good. All right. Other questions?
I'm looking at the words at the peak up there. Does that say general prices?
General offices.
General
Chicago.
offices,
Yes.
and then it says Chicago. Is that
Chicago.
in Chicago?
Yes,
Or?
they're,
Oh, that's the Chicago
So
location.
this is the Woodstock location. They're saying that their offices are in Chicago, and they actually built a custom building that still stands today on North Dearborn Street. The front facade of the building says the Oliver Typewriter Company in the design of the building over and over.
Really?
It is a national landmark, and it's green. It's this a green, not quite an olive green, but more of a lighter green. And the whole motif of the building is original, and it's actually used by a theater house. And they have in the front store windows play advertisements. So they're making good use of it, which is nice.
Other questions? Yes.
How much longer is this?
That's up to the audience. I think we're getting close to wrapping up, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. Yes.
Do you know if Oliver moved from Iowa to the Chicago, Kenosha/Woodstock area to be close to a metropolitan area?
That is a good question. Oliver, he lived in Iowa, and then once they were up and running here in Woodstock, I believe he might have lived on the East Coast for a couple years because he had other inventions, but then he relocated to Chicago. It was very metropolitan Chicago. He was right near a train station, and he could travel to Woodstock pretty easily. But his final residence was Chicago.
What were Thomas Oliver's kids' names?
Oh, gosh.
This is great.
You might know.
Oh, that's a good question. There's a Adam was his
Oliver?
father.
No.
Google knows.
It was there's a good photo of his kids in here.
Oliver.
Yes, it was Judson, his son, his granddaughter Julia, his father was Adam, and he had a third child, Wilbur. And here's a neat photo actually of his father and his other 2 kids here, which was published in the the magazine of the company from the day, which is kind of neat.
Did he have any girl kids?
Julia Oliver was his only daughter.
All right, any others? Okay, so I want to first and foremost extend my thanks to Jett and his family for making this. It's absolutely fascinating to learn this. You know, so much about what Woodstock is from a culture perspective is all, you know, it's sort of historical, but we focus appropriately on the historical square and the historical buildings, Opera House, Old Courthouse, all the old houses. That's great. It's really fascinating to kind of fill in the pieces around something that existed here. You know, it's also striking to me there's parallels. I mean, the iPhone 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17, right? I mean, it happened the same way, you know. And instead of a 30-cent case that costs $20, you know, on our phones, you know, the cases here for traveling, you know, different yet the same. What's also fascinating to me is that the typewriter. I like to be a student of history and look back and kind of put things, you know, place things. What's unique to me is that, you know, printed things, you know, alphabets and writing started, you know, millions of years, maybe not millions, but, you know, centuries upon centuries upon centuries ago. And then, you know, Gutenberg printing press, right? And that started the process of being able to distribute. But it was still manually, right? Still manually produced. And these typewriters come along, you know, in the 1870s, 1880s, and kind of change the game for how print and communication occurs. But then they have a period of time, and by the year 2000, right, or certainly by 2010, anybody seen a computer in active use? I haven't, not in business or not anywhere, and so they essentially disappear. But what's unique is that an element of them still exists and may exist for centuries. You know, the QWERTY keyboard, right? That an element of it is taken, and so I just kind of find that personally kind of fascinating. You know, it's you know, Michelle, I cannot thank you enough for taking the idea, and I had sat down with Roscoe and others and our marketing and communications team, and I said, you know, we owe it to the guy who put these together. When I talked to him, he's like, you know, I'm like, do you have an idea for how you want to use this? And he goes, well, I would like to see them in a museum, you know, put them in a single place and have them all there. And I did tell him when I was leaving, after he told me that, I said, I don't know if I can promise you a single building, because frankly, I have no idea where that would be, okay? But, you know, so I challenged staff and our own thinking, okay, what can we do with this? And so, again, Michelle, what a phenomenal idea to put them out in the community, structure it, make it accessible to the public, you know, and something that we can highlight and promote about Woodstock. So give a final round of applause for Jett and get on the trail. Tell your friends about the trail. We will be doing some production of this event right here and some other things to market the existence of this. A little part of me wonders if it might catch a little fire elsewhere in the rest of the country, and people are like, oh, well, you know, stop by Woodstock and see this very unique thing. So we're going to do that to, you know, continue to put ourselves on the map and generate awareness of Woodstock and something that we have that is, you know, this totally unique. You know, I thank you all for coming, and you know, it's out on realwoodstock.com. The library website has it as well. We will continue to use those tools to promote this and educate the public on it. So my thanks to all of you for coming tonight. Jett, thank you again.
Thank you.